Welcome to the Fringe Youth Worker Podcast with TJ and Sonny.
Hello and welcome to the Fringe Youth Worker Podcast. My name is TJ McConaughey, and tonight I am joined by a very special guest, co-host, the Justin Herman of the Controlled Chaos Podcast. Justin is an early supporter of the show. Before there was a show, Justin was helping us out, and he was one of our first guests on the show. He was our first guest on the show. So 22 episodes later, he is making his appearance again. What's up, Justin?
Dude, to be honest, I'm really stunned that you asked me to co-host with you. I feel like you could have got a lot better people than me. There were probably a lot of unavailable people, you got me, and I'm very thankful. But I'm very humbled, and I'm a big fan of your podcast. I listen to it all the time.
Yeah, they were lining up, man. It was you or TD Jakes or Andy Stanley. Oh wait, all of those guys have been on the Controlled Chaos podcast. So if you guys don't know, and I'm sure if you're listening to my podcast, you know about Justin's podcast, but just in case you don't, Justin has a very successful podcast. In fact, I think it's probably the number one or number two, somewhere in there, youth ministry podcast on the planet. It is actually an honor for us to have Justin on the show. Justin's got some accolades to his name. He's got a book that somehow he got with Kurt Johnson on, and he got to be a part of that whole book thing. And just a lot of awesome things. But we're not here to talk about Justin as much as it's fun to talk about Justin. We are here to talk about Fringe Youth Work. And are you excited, Justin?
Yeah, I'm really excited. There's something that's near and dear to me. When I first heard, obviously, the idea of the show, it caught my interest immediately. So you're right, I was a really early supporter because there's nothing out there like what you guys are doing. And so I'm really excited to co-host it. And the Fringe, man, the Fringe is right there. It's right there with genius, right? I mean, the line between genius and insanity. The Fringe, it's like some people think, you think of a fringe idea. A lot of people are going to look at that and be like, oh, I don't know, that's really crazy. But those who know, those who are on the inside, know that a good fringe idea can change the world. And that's why this podcast is so great. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, I'm done with all this chit-chat. How about we get to the show?
Let's do it, dude. Let's totally do it. Yes.
Join the conversation on Facebook and Instagram. And when you subscribe to this podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating. We desperately need your approval.
I crafted this question because it's something that's kind of been on my heart and my mind. And it's a kind of a long question, so get ready here, Justin, all right? It's a long question, but I think it's going to lead us to some good places, all right? As a youth worker or youth pastor or youth leader, how should we respond both online and in person to hot button politically charged events? How do we do this thing? Because there's a lot going on, man. There's a lot going on in our world, and you see parents and you see kids post about these things, and half the time they're posting, it just comes off as wrong, and you kind of want to say something, but most of the time I kind of hold my tongue and I don't type something back, and I'm sort of wondering, is that the wrong approach, or is it the right approach? What do you think, Justin?
I love this. You're already going to get me into trouble, okay? Because I definitely have political thoughts, political leanings. I won't share every one of those, but I think some of them will become very obvious. When I was working in the church, I remember having the same kind of discussion. And what makes it difficult is that as church workers, we're not just sharing an opinion. We're also speaking kind of for the church. When we post something in support of or in not support of something, we're in a lot of ways speaking for the church. We're saying as an employee of the church, I hold this stance, and if your stance is different than the church's stance, it can become a big deal. And if there's a lot of people in your church that have a differing opinion from the church's stance, maybe it's kind of like, well, we don't really know where everyone stands, but now it's out there and it becomes a big deal thing. And I, my wisdom in it, I'm going to steal from Kurt Johnston. Maybe not. It's a maybe not leadership, metric. Sometimes it's worth saying something, but maybe not. You need to count the cost. If you're going to say something that's going to throw huge wrenches in, if it's counter to what the church leadership believes and you're putting yourself on an island, those are things to consider. There shouldn't be pressure on youth workers to comment on every single social thing that's happening. But I just had Andrew Clavin on the Control Chaos podcast. He's a serious political guy. I got not tons, but I got a few hate messages sent my way of like, I can't believe you had this political guy on. One of the things he said was super wise. You can't be pushed into a place of fear that if you share what you truly believe, if you have a true conviction on something, that you can't share it out of fear. That's insane. But there's things that you have to weigh out, and I think weighing it out is what makes it difficult sometimes. But man, there's a lot of current topics that I have really strong opinions on. Obviously, I'm not working in the church right now. I do the podcast, so I've probably been more open with some of those thoughts than I was when I was working at the church. So I'm a little bit more free now. I'm, kind of unhinged, unplugged like Neo from The Matrix, which is the second time The Matrix has come up on this podcast, by the way.
Oh, man.
I'm unplugged so I can be a little more outgoing with my view.
Are you enjoying that? Are you enjoying that part of not working for the church?
I definitely, 100%. 100%. I wish I could say oh no, I miss it and I miss, but you know what? I actually like sharing what I think. I went to a friend of mine is a writer for the Daily Beast. He works at CNN. He's a common contributor at CNN, and he was out in LA on the Bill Maher show, and he invited me to come hang out. So I was there, and Van Jones was there, and I could hang out with Bill Maher a little bit. And you talk about people who have very different views than I do. But do you know what's so interesting? This is what's so interesting. People will get so heated on Facebook, so heated on Twitter, like they will literally go at it with each other. These guys do this for a living. My friend Matt Lewis, Matt Lewis in the News, he does a great podcast, Matt Lewis in the News. I've been on his podcast, which was a huge honor. That goes out to probably 1 million people or more. It was a huge honor to be on his podcast. And he has really conservative points of view, very similar to me, to be honest with you. And Bill Maher does not have conservative points of view. Van Jones does not have conservative points of view. But yet we all go back to the green room afterwards, which, by the side note, was awesome. We all go back to the green room, and guess what? They're not standing in separate corners throwing hate bombs at each other. They're all hanging out, laughing with each other, joking with each other. And so, it reminds me of the movie that I hate called Fever Pitch. I absolutely hate that movie because I hate the Boston Red Sox. Truly, I worked with Apple to block our podcast in Massachusetts because I do not want Red Sox fans benefiting from any of the good stuff on the Control Cast podcast.
Whoa. Who's your team on the? Are you a Yankees fan or Mets fan?
New York Yankees, bro.
Okay.
New York Yankees.
All right. Wow, my goodness. You know what? Somebody should have screened this. I don't know if this is gonna work.
You gotta work that out with your producer, man.
I gotta work it out with the producer.
You gotta work it out with them.
All right.
Which I got a funny story about that sometime. But I digress. So in the movie Fever Pitch, the guys were at a steakhouse and they're just sweating over the playoffs. They're sweating over it. They're getting anxious about it. And it cuts to a clip of Johnny Damon and a couple of the other actual Boston Red Sox players all at a table laughing, relaxing, hanging out. And it's just this great dichotomy of people that take things way too seriously. And politics are the same thing. People take it way too seriously. Like the people who do this as a professional political analyst things, they're not going home and sweating bullets. Maybe they're on Twitter, but in the green room, it's like, hey, we fought it out on the screen, and now we're back in the green room kind of relaxing. So it's really interesting to me.
Yeah, no, that is an interesting thing, especially in an era right now where things are just so politically charged, man. There's so many hot topic things. Don't go there.
Give me an example.
Well, there's two that I can think of right now, right off the bat. First of all, the Bible Belt has been there's some states been down there actually going against abortion and saying, hey, now's our window. If we're going to make some hay, now it's happening. And it started this last week with Georgia, and then Georgia going with the heartbeat ban. And then Alabama just upped the ante and said, nope, we're going to ban abortion outright. And it has caused actually a lot of conversation, even in conservative circles, Justin. I think when you talk about like evangelicals and you're talking about this, abortion is our topic. That is the topic that keeps the Bible Belt red. If I was going to say something there, but yeah, one of the things that I think is really interesting was that I think it was Pat Robinson, who is no liberal person. He came out against the Alabama ban because he said that it went too far, and he felt like it was too reaching. And here's the thing: is morally, I agree with the Alabama ban. But I'm wondering if we're not going to get as much going this hard, this quick. What do you think?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on abortion, and I've looked at it from a lot of different angles over the years. So, full disclosure, I was adopted. My mother was a prostitute in New York City.
Whoa.
I'm very open about that. I think I've talked about that before on the podcast, but maybe I haven't actually. I don't know. But she was a prostitute in New York City. She became pregnant. And,
wow.
Talk about, affecting your career. If there's not a lot of people down for pregnant prostitutes, maybe there's a few, but, very, very few. Most people do not. That's a big turnoff to a lot of people. Yeah. Not to, if your wife's pregnant, that's a completely different story. We're going on a rabbit trail. So the point is my birth mother, was a prostitute.
Things you would never say on your own show, Justin.
Oh God, never. Never.
This is like your vent, right? Like you come on here just to spew, all right.
That's why I love this podcast. That's why I love Fringe Youth Worker for sure.
This is the alternative podcast right here. All right, go ahead.
You know what? It's right there between Bad Christian, which I think is probably like
that's way further down for us. Yeah,
that's further down the road. I'm not a big fan of the podcast, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And our podcast is like Fringe Youth Workers right there. It's like that's why I love it. Every time I listen, I'm like, I wish I could say that on mine, but people would email me. So she was story. She was a prostitute, got pregnant, and could have had an abortion. A lot of people probably encouraged her to. I never met her. She decided to carry me to term, gave birth to me, and then she just didn't want to be a mom, didn't want to have kids, gave me right up for adoption. I probably spent 5 minutes with her, based on the stories that I've heard from my mother and others. Probably spent 5 minutes with her, and she just handed me over for adoption.
Wow.
And I was adopted 4 months later to a couple from Buffalo, New York, where I grew up. So that's something that I take really seriously. So that's number one. Number two, I put a lot of thought into it. I think that parents are going to ask us, people are going to ask us, and I think being a youth worker, having a perspective on it. Some girl in your youth ministry gets pregnant. The days of the family just sending her up to Canada for a year to study secretively as she carries this baby and gives birth. That's what they did in the 70s. Okay, they don't do that anymore. So people are going to ask, and you should have an opinion. So I have an opinion not only as a Christian, but as a person, someone that's part of their story. And it's not strictly just this is what the Bible says. I look at some science. I think morally, like what do I consider life to be? What's the value of life? And so back to your question specifically, I'm pro-life in a huge way. The Alabama bill is a huge step. It's going to get struck down by the courts for sure. I think a big part of the bill was to challenge Roe v. Wade and go to the Supreme Court. I think that it will. I think that it will probably fail when it gets there. There's some who'd say, let's take incremental steps as you chip away at Roe v. Wade and abortion laws in the United States if you're a pro-life person. And then there's people who say, you know what, we have conservative people on the court. Here's our chance. Let's go for it. And they are, and I don't fault them for that, because here's the thing: if you believe it's a human life, he or she, if you believe that life starts at conception. Here's the thing that I think is so wild when it comes to science. So I'm not even talking the Bible, I'm talking science. If you believe in the Big Bang, if you believe at some moment there was nothing and then there was something, if you believe in evolution, which most people do who aren't, church people, so you believe things can evolve over time, if you believe in climate change, you're going to grill me on climate change, okay, and how the world's going to end in a couple of decades.
Very pro-science in that topic.
Yeah. But yet you can't look at life and say, oh yeah, at conception, at the moment of fertilization, that uninterrupted leads to a path of life, and that is the beginning, and left uninterrupted, it will become a living, talking person. You can't get behind that. It's insane to me. And but once you get to that place where you're like, okay, at fertilization, that is the beginning of life, that left uninterrupted, that will become life.
Yeah.
To me, it brings every argument into focus, which I've heard every argument, I've seen every argument, every argument's been thrown to me.
Yeah.
I've heard them all, and I'll be honest with you. If you believe life starts at conception, it makes every single argument very, very simple, and some of them really, really hard. But you look at some of the data, you look at what it's done to our country, you look at what it's done to families. I personally haven't met someone. Like personally, I'm not talking someone on Twitter who's trying to get a following. I'm trying to talk to someone who's gone through an abortion who said, "Oh man, I really am thankful I did that." And I'm not talking about the person on Twitter who is saying it because they're pro-choice and they're trying to. And for them, it's a political issue. I'm talking about the person I've sat knee to knee with, who for them it's an emotional issue. I've never met someone who said, "Oh, I'm just totally for that." But again, leaving the Bible totally out of it. Just starting from a scientific place, I believe if you can buy into so much of science and what happens in the world and what happens in the galaxy and what happens in our on Earth, you can believe that we live on a planet that if the oxygen or like the levels were just tweaked in like just one direction, or the carbon dioxide levels were tweaked just in a little bit more of a direction, or if the Earth was just like a few 100 miles closer to the sun, like there wouldn't be life on Earth. It's like, so okay, you can believe in the perfect creation of the place we live and all the things that had to go right for it to exist. But you're not going to believe that life begins at conception, okay? But if you have that stance, which I do,
and it's
and I'm open about
it,
it brings every argument into focus.
Yeah, and that's where and I think that's where a lot of us are at as Christians, and I think this is the hard thing because there are people who are pro-choice who listen to this podcast, but I think one of the things that's hard for people to realize here is that if you think this is a human life, there is no compromise. I mean, this is, this, in my opinion, Justin, and maybe I'm wrong about this, this is the civil rights movement of our day. And I think we've gotten confused on which civil rights movement is the civil rights movement of our day. But there is one group of people who are not being permitted human rights that are human, that have all the DNA of humans, and they're not being permitted those things until they exit the womb. And I think that's a very interesting thing. And I think that, 100 years from now, there's a few things you're going to look back on and say, wow, they were barbarians. And I think...
I'm happy you said that. I completely agree with you.
And I hope...
I 100% agree with you.
Yeah, and I hope that this is one of them. I hope we're not still doing this. But I think one
of
the
things...
It will be. And that's why I think that what Alabama is doing right now is kind of heroic in that way. But there's two sides of me here, right? The first side's strategy, right? And I think Georgia's a better strategy. But then there's the moral side of me and the emotional side of me, which says, you go Alabama, throw down, let's do this, And so I'm interested to see how it plays out. I'm interested to have the conversation. And here's the thing is, I have so many arguments about abortion, but I've never gotten into an argument with someone who's pro-life on these things because our bumper stickers do the arguing for us nowadays. Our statuses on Facebook and Twitter do the arguing for us. And you're right. It's weird that that nowadays we come off so, there's these talking heads on TV, Bill Maher, all these guys, and they're going to be screaming at each other. But it is interesting that they go back in the green room and they're just high-fiving, and I wonder how much of this is, hurting the country, that we become a country of rhetoric. But I know we could talk about that. We are not a political podcast, and you probably talked a lot about that with Andrew Clavin. I'm gonna move us forward. That's a great answer.
I will say quickly, if anyone listens to this and they're like, what's Justin really saying? Feel free to email me, man. Throw my email in the show notes. I'd be willing to have this conversation with anyone, anytime. It's not about winning, losing debates. That's not what I'm in the business of. I think the Bible actually tells us not to be to people who debate. But I'll talk about what I believe and what I think, and I'll start with science, and I'll go right into the Bible and talk about the morality of it. But I'm willing to do it with anybody anytime.
And I appreciate you talking about the science of it, because I think that's one of the things that's like, this is predominantly a Christian podcast. We have a lot of non-Christians who listen to this because Sonny exists in a different world than the church. But one of the things that I like that you go from that science angle, because it's weird that we got this thing where science and religion agree, and there's still this there's still this convenience argument. Anyway, we got to move on. On from that. But I do appreciate that. Hey, if you're on Facebook right now, or if you're on Instagram right now, you can just drop it right there. If you want to get into the Facebook argument, go ahead and do that on our page. We'll take the traffic. And
my DMs are open, so DM me anytime. Instagram at Hey Justin Herman. DM me anytime. My DMs are open.
Yes,
I just love saying that. I think it sounds so cool when you say that. My DMs are open.
It's something my mom would be like, "What's he saying there? What's that? What's a DM?
What's a DM?"
Tales from the Fringe. This is we call our listeners randos. They voted on that, and that's the title they wanted. So this is the randos' favorite segment of our show, which is Tales from the Fringe. And it's, humans, we love storytelling, right? We love storytelling. Whenever there's a sermon, whenever there's any of that stuff, we tend to just move forward in our chairs to listen to a story. Jesus used this thing called parable, which is just another way of saying he told stories. And so we want to hear from you, Justin. Do you have a tale from the fringe, working with a fringe kid, working on the fringes of society? Do you have a story that kind of comes to mind for you on that?
Yeah, I got a story for you. So there was a student in my youth ministry. Love this kid. I'm not going to share his name. But his parents were going through a pretty serious divorce. His dad was screwing around the mom. And they had 4 boys, Mexican family, super great family. And he was just falling in with this wrong group of kids. He was still coming to a small group. We went to Chipotle one week. Okay, love Chipotle. Can't get me enough Chipotle. And we went to Chipotle. One of the students in our group had, this is a totally side note, but it was the reason we were at Chipotle. We had a student in our group who passed away from brain cancer, very sad. And there was a night at Chipotle where people could eat food and whatnot. And the proceeds went to the family or, the cause, whatever. So we were there at Chipotle getting food, and I ordered with him. He got a cup for water. Okay, this is such a small thing. Got a cup for water. Put soda in the cup. Came back to the table, and I just said, "Hey, didn't you get water?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, I'm like, "But you fill it with soda. Come on, man. That's not don't be that guy." And he's like, "Well, what's the problem?" And then he starts dropping F-bombs. All right, I know we can't drop F-bombs on the podcast, okay? So instead of saying F-bomb, instead of saying the word, I'm just going to say F-bomb, okay? That's what I'm going to say. So he was like, what the F-bomb is, the problem. And this dude's like in 7th grade, by the way. And I'm like, man, because that's like stealing. Come on, don't be that guy, blah, blah, integrity. I'm just saying all these things. And he literally takes the soda, throws it on the ground. And this is in front of everyone in the group. Throws it on the the ground, walks out the door, starts as if he's starts walking home. And so I'm literally in the parking lot, walking with him through the parking lot as he's just dropping F-bombs at me, and now we both know it's not about the soda, obviously. But because he just has a bunch of stuff in his life going on. And I remember his mom, we called her, she came and picked him up, and she was apologizing. She didn't know what to do. I felt terrible, for her. But that kid, it's like he had every reason not to come. He was angry about stuff. He was angry at me. He was angry at the church, probably in some ways. Definitely angry at his dad. But he kept coming, because we just kept calling him, kept pursuing him, kept inviting him. And I wish I could say oh my gosh, everything's just perfect now. We still text. He's in high school now. We still text, and he tells me how things are going. I tell him how things are going, and we pray for each other a little bit. And it's not the shiny, polished relationship. But man, oh man, it is consistent. Hopefully he looks back in years and says, oh my gosh, Justin was, for me at least.
Yeah.
But he's one of my Fringe kids.
Yeah, and you know what the crazy thing about that is, if you work with kids on the Fringe, there's a breaking point with a lot of these kids because they don't know how to emotionally regulate a lot of times, and so they tend to blow up when they blow up. And and you're right when you say it's not about this. It's about probably 10 other things that they didn't say anything about, and a couple of things here I want to hit on. First of all, good for you for continuing to pursue that relationship, continuing to love on him past the point of, hey, you just screamed at me, and that was kind of embarrassing. But the other thing I want to kind of touch on here, and maybe some people would look at this and say, well, hey, is it that big of a deal that he got pop or soda or pop, whatever, Coke, wherever you're at in the United States listening to this thing, when he was supposed to get water. And I really think it's actually a good thing for youth pastors to model good moral behavior, good virtuous behavior, because a kid who will sell his integrity for $1 soda is somebody who could really mess society up in a certain way. And that is a kid who does not have a moral compass very much right there. And so, with me, I've heard kids cuss and I've heard kids do that, and I don't get really big on that stuff. But when it comes to things like you stole that, we have to put our foot down. We have to say, no, hey, come on, man, your integrity is worth more. I think you're worth more than this soda. Let's do this thing. And again, I'm sure if he would have asked you would have bought it for him. So yeah, I like that story. I appreciate it. Another good idea of Tales on the Fringe and hanging in there past the freak out, man. Hanging in there past the freak out. All right, my tale of the Fringe goes back to my Fringe childhood. Growing up in the Bay Area, I was in middle school. No, it was right before middle school, so it was 5th grade. And I had just gotten socially aware. The opposite sex became a thing right around that 5th grade year for me. And I realized that I looked like a slob, and I didn't want to look like a slob anymore. So I started to take longer to get ready, and a couple things changed. I started wanting to buy nicer shoes, and we had to wear uniforms, so shoes were a big deal for us. And then the other thing that you could do is you could do your hair, right? And the style back then, Justin, the style when I was in 5th grade in the Bay Area was to take a crazy amount of hair gel and slick your hair straight back, just like a greaser look. I don't know why that was in the late 90s, but that was the look that everyone was doing, just straight greasering it back and just straight there and just holding it in place. And I never tried it before, never once tried it before, but I decided to give it a shot. And that morning was the morning I went into the bathroom and I flipped the light on. And it did that thing where it flashed real quick and then the light went off. But I thought, hey, there's window light coming through. I can get this hairstyle down. And so I just took a bunch of gel, just a bunch of hair gel, and I just pushed that sucker back, tried to comb it the best I could. And then I was late, so I ran out the door. And I'm on my way to school, and I'm late. And we had crossing guards. Did you have crossing guards where you were at, Justin, where they helped you cross?
Yeah. We had crossing guards all the time. They were awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, and so this guy, he sees me a long ways off, and I think he can tell that I've changed something, like something is different with me, and he's kind of looking at me, and then he stops me, before I walk into 5th grade, and he goes, "Hey, man, I'm going to save you a lot of heartache because you have a huge gob of gel that is not rubbed in, that's just sticking right on the top of your head right now, man. It is literally just right on the top of your head right now." And I was so embarrassed, right? I didn't even say anything to him. I ran to the bathroom, and of course he's right. And I was in there just kind of like trying to get it all off, and I got it all off, and I went back then. And for the rest of the day, I wasn't embarrassed. And I was so incredibly thankful for a crossing guard to tell me the truth. A crossing guard to tell me the truth. Now, let's just look at the elements of this story really quick, okay? Just the elements of this story. First of all, me becoming social aware, that's, every kid did that. But then, what kind of person is, in their mid-30s, 40s, and they got the job as the crossing guard, right? Like, we're not talking about somebody who's, launched in life, But here's a guy who is a fringe youth worker, and he totally fits into that category. He works with youth for a living. He's on the fringes of society, and he has enough wherewithal to say, "Hey, man, I'm going to save you a world of hurt." And man, you know that if I walk in there with that hair gel in San Jose, California, on the top of my head, I would have never lived it down. I would have been that kid forever.
Yeah, you'd have been done for. You'd have been done for.
Yeah, and so I'm always appreciative out there. And so that's one of the things I wanted to talk to some of our fringe listeners out there. If you have a story of a youth worker who entered your life for just 2 seconds but made a huge difference, go ahead and drop that in the comments section of this video. We'd love to hear from you.
You're still listening to the Fringe Youth Worker Podcast.
This is great so far. I love this podcast. I don't believe that I get to be part of this right now. This is awesome.
All right. Save it for TD Jakes. All right.
Oh my! You mean the Bishop? He actually likes to be called just the Bishop. So
the Bishop.
He doesn't like to be called TD Jakes. Not his full name, just the Bishop.
Just the Bishop.
Or just Bishop. Just Bishop.
Yeah. One of those guys. All right. So this next section is brand new. It's our third time doing this. It's Pick or Flick. And Pick or Flick is a very cool way of us kind of just doing a rapid fire. Here's some topics, and let's talk about them as youth workers. Let's just say where we land on these things. It's fun. We get some quick opinions, and there's no argument here. Like, there's no back and forth. It's just your take, my take, and we move on to the next one.
Really?
Here, okay?
Oh man! What if I want to argue? What if I disagree with something?
Well, if you disagree with me on my show, I don't know.
I can go screw myself.
I just don't think it's going to make the final cut. That's what I'm going to say.
You'll edit it. Where did that 5-minute thing go? I don't know. It just didn't work out.
I'm totally in control here, bro. So, so I can definitely make that.
You know what? Talking about control, I follow a bunch of Enneagram. I don't know if you're an Enneagram guy.
Yeah.
I follow a bunch of Enneagram Instagrams. And one of them for the 8, because I'm an 8, one of them today was, today let someone else lead. And I unfollowed them. They can go to hell with that kind of hateful, that kind of hate, fake news, offensive, violent, because speech is violent. Violent language. So
it's basically
I unfollowed them for sure.
The Enneagram is basically fortune cookies for smart people. That's what I think.
You know what? You know what? It's so funny. The church that I used to work at was all in on the Enneagram. So
really,
that was between their thing. that and snake holding, they were in on that stuff big time.
Shots fired. I'm just kidding. Shots fired.
Yeah, finally I can share how I really feel about that whole situation.
Yes, so I'm just joking. I take it the severance has run out, but we'll move on from there. All right.
man.
So let's pick or
I
flick
can't even say anything.
before we
I
get
can't
into
even say
trouble here.
anything.
Let's-
I'm already in trouble. Keep going. Pick or flick. That sounds
pick or
great.
flick. So look in front of you, Justin. From the topics I sent you, you need to pick out two. I'm going to pick out two. And if I pick out one that you wanted, then tough. Or if you pick out the one that you have to pick another one, okay? So you go first since I don't have it in front of me right now.
So I just picked two from that list.
Just one right now. You're going to go, and then I'm going to
All
go.
right,
then
I'm
you're
gonna
go.
I'm gonna pick self-promotion.
Self promo, man. Okay, so self promo. This is a big no on the youth pastor forums, and I've learned this, and I think probably Justin's learned this a little bit. They're kind of self promo Nazis on those suckers, and as much as I love them, right? I think they're super helpful. Download youth ministry stuff you can use, youth pastors only, great resources, great, awesome. But if you're selling anything that's not theirs. You're gonna get flagged. And here's the thing: is it doesn't even have to be like you're selling things or you're like actually making money off of things. If it kind of comes off as too much you and not enough us or them, then you get off of there. So my take on it's this: all of social media is self promo. I don't even know where the line is anymore. I have no idea where the line is. I mean, what is Instagram if it's not self-promo? What is Facebook if it's not self-promo? What is Twitter if it's not self-promo? I mean, the people who are on these things are eights. You know, if we're going to steal something from the last thing, these are people who want to put themselves out there and live a very public life. Certain personalities don't want to live a very very public life, and so they're just not even on the internet. So as far as we're talking about self-promo online, I think it's really hard to say, okay, this type of thing is okay and this type of thing is not okay. I think if you're going to self-promo, it just needs to be good. You better be worth self-promoing. And, you know, if you got good quality stuff that you're bringing to the table, self-promo all the time. You know, these guys who are, you know, that we all look up to, Andy Stanley, Francis Chan, the Bishop, they got no problem with self-promo. Why? Because we know their names. I know that because we know their names. You know, if you got a problem with self-promo, then we probably don't know your name. And so that's just my hot take on it right there. I'm going to put it right out there. That might sound self-aggrandizing to some people, but that's it. There it is. What do you think?
Yeah, you know what I think? I think that there's not a business leader in the world who talks poorly about self-promotion. Anyone who talks poorly about self-promotion does not understand business. They do not understand how to build a company. They don't understand how to build profits. They don't understand it in the age of social media that a brand is not just a product. A brand is a person. That's why Steve Jobs was always out there. We weren't buying Apple. We're buying Steve Jobs. That's why Phil Ivey said, if Johnny Ives, has said if he ever leaves Apple, he knows that the stock prices will go down because, we're not just buying an iPhone, we're buying, Johnny Ives. Every company has knowledge of this, and ministry, like many organizations, is slow to catch up. I think it's hilarious when the people snocking, quote unquote, I'm doing air quotes right now for the people just listening to the podcast. The people who knock self-promotion are the people who 10 minutes later I'll get an email with their face on it. I can't roll my eyes deeper in the back of my head when someone I cannot roll my eyes. There's not an emoji created yet that is effective enough to communicate my view on someone saying, hey, don't self-promote. By the way, here's my thing over and over again. The self-promotion in the Christian circle is determined by who has the power. If it's their Facebook group, and I'm going to use DYM just as an example. I'm just going to use them as an example. And I'm friends with all those guys. I love those guys. But yeah, okay, sure. It's the DYM Facebook group. You guys are running it. Sure, you don't want anyone self-promoting. Sure, that's your thing. That's great. And you have a ton of people on there. Great. Super. You make the rules. But don't knock other people. Don't shame other people. If a youth pastor's side business was doing oil changes in his community, if his side business was selling bars of soap, then he'd be marketing that a different way. If his side business, and not everyone wants a side business. Some people are happy with the business that's in front of them. Other people want to do a little more on the side to make money for their family because they're passionate. They want to write a little, they want to do some content stuff, and they don't want to give it all over to DYM. And I'm just, again, using them as an example. But if you do I know guys who do DYM podcasts. You can't get sponsors from they're not making money off sponsors from other organizations. Like, Controlled Chaos, we're blessed to have CIY. We love CIY. Check them out, CIY.com. They're amazing people. We love CIY. The DYM people, they're not making money off other sponsors, other people who are pouring money into their podcast. If you write for Orange, you can't write for stuff you can use. The companies will put these lines out there, and the ones with the power are the ones who draw the lines, and the ones who don't. But there's nothing wrong with having a side hustle, a side business thing. And if you have a side thing, and you don't understand that you're not just promoting the product, you're promoting yourself. They're buying into that thing. They're buying into you. Self-promotion is a huge part of it. And listen, and this isn't me. I've talked to legit business leaders. I've talked to Ken Coleman, solid guy. I've talked to Andrew Clavin, solid guy. I'm going to be having Dave Ramsey on the podcast. I'm going to be talking to him about self-promotion.
Are you seriously going to have Dave Ramsey on the podcast?
Yeah. It's going to be really exciting.
Oh my goodness, Justin!
And here's the thing: when you start
speaking of self-promoing, that's perfect. So good.
But when you hear business leaders who also do ministry say, "Oh yeah, self-promotion," of course. Like, I asked that question of Ken Coleman. You can go back and listen to the episode. I asked him about self-promotion, and he said, if you're doing any kind of business thing and you don't understand self-promotion, you're not self-promoting, then you're just leaving chips on the table, that you're bonkers. So anyone who shames people into thinking self-promotion is a bad thing doesn't really understand business. And anyone who disagrees with me can come talk to me anytime, and I'll give you my thoughts and strategy, and you can give me your thoughts and strategy. And then at the end of the year, we'll both look at our 1099s, and then we'll see who, we'll see where we, but that's what it is.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
In it to make money, which is not a sinful thing. The love of money is a sinful thing. I don't love money. I love my family. I want to provide for them. I want to make sure money's put away for retirement. I want to make sure money's put away for my kid's education. My one kid has special needs. I want to make sure that we provide the best behavioral therapists for him and provide, the best stuff that he needs for school. There's nothing wrong with that. Anyone who says otherwise is either a hypocrite, small-minded, or just a jerk who's really out for their own stuff. And you can take that to the bank. There you go.
Yeah. Hey, I'd like to comment on that, but I'm not going to because we're moving on. So it is just a straight take from Justin. And Justin is coming in hot today. All right. Speaking of hot and ready, I'm going to talk to you about a youth ministry staple, and I want your raw opinion on it. Little Caesars Pizza. Okay, Little Caesars Pizza. Where are you at with that?
I won't lie. I would flick this. I don't eat cheese. I don't like pizza. I eat chicken wings. I'm from Buffalo. There you go.
So you don't eat pizza at all?
No, I don't eat pizza at all.
Oh my!
If I do,
goodness.
I get it without cheese. But that's so complex for most people. It's actually so funny. I've met so many intelligent people who cannot understand how to order a pizza without cheese that it's like, how. I know you're intelligent, but you're acting so stupid right now.
Yeah,
it boggles my mind.
Well,
my wife's an expert.
I understand
at it,
how that you can. I understand that you can order it without cheese. I just don't know why you would. But at the same time,
I don't like cheese.
Hey, you know what? Straight up, it's a hot.
I'm trying to keep my.
It's a hot take.
I'm trying to keep my figure.
You're flicking it, and I'm okay with that. I am someone who loves pizza, but I hate Little Caesars Pizza. And Little Caesars Pizza is the staple because it's the cheapest pizza, right? It's that and Domino's, right? And so every youth ministry event that I've done since day one, we've had some sort of cheap pizza there. And Little Caesars Pizza, first of all, you have to eat it right when it comes out that door, when it's still hot, because then your taste buds don't know the difference between hot and good, right? It's oh, this is hot and it kind of goes down my throat good. if it gets a little bit, if it cools off just a little bit, it becomes something that is uneatable. And you're like, what am I putting into my body? And so youth pastors who are filling up those events with Little Caesars pizza might want to think twice about that one, because I'm flicking Little Caesars pizza as well. I'm not flicking pizza altogether. That's a Justin take. I'm flicking Little Caesars pizza. No, thank you. Never again. All right, what do you got?
You know what? I'm taking a look at this list here. I'm seeing essential oils, and it really catches my attention. Okay, I like essential oils. We have diffusers in my house. I use them before I go to sleep. I take the vitamins every day. And there's a lot of different blends. Ylang Ylang specifically is a sex blend that my wife and I use to
Okay,
to
whoa! We don't need this. We don't need the visual. So.
I'm just saying I pick essential oils.
You talk about this with Dave Ramsey, okay? When you have him on.
I have the roller balls. I have a travel kit that goes with me when I go places. And people will make fun of me, but you know what? I breathe really well. I sleep really well. I'm a big fan of essential oils, and it's right there with the Enneagram and snake holding. I mean, it's just like if you go to I'm not going to say the church's name, but there's some churches out there that's really down for that kind of stuff. They use essential oils during to bless people and pray for them. So the lavender.
Here we go. Just like Jesus did.
Just like he did exactly. My wife sells essential oils too. That's her side hustle.
Yeah,
oil mama. So you can go follow her on Instagram.
And here we go. And this is where my hot take's going to come in real hot. Then, I'm not a big fan. I'm not a big fan of the essential oils. Wow. I think first of all, whoever oils in general has had a great marketer. Whoever's the oil publicist, I'd like to meet them, because they turned oil around, right? Like for a while, oil was spilling in the Gulf, and it's the worst thing ever. Oil's gonna, it's causing our greenhouse emissions to go through the roof. Can't keep burning all these fossil fuels, which are oils essentially here. Okay, but
are you talking about crude oil from
what I'm saying
from
is
Saudi Arabia?
I'm talking about oils in general, right? Like I'm talking about the word oil at this point, right? Is it is turned around, right? Because now we're putting it in diffusers, and we are breathing in all these different oils and all these different things. And I don't know, man. I just see it as like the newest, I don't know, whatever the Macarena was. It's like, okay, everybody's got to be into this thing now, and there's a lot of people selling
My wife went to the oil convention. She knows a lot about oils.
Oh my goodness,
the deeply Mormon convention thing, by the way. No, this is a real story. She went to the oil convention. They had all the people there, the science people there, the whole thing, and they had a special guest. Hugh Jackman was there at this oil convention. Okay,
of course he was.
I'm not making this up at all.
Okay,
and he's there singing songs. He's like trained in music. I mean, he does musicals. He sings. So he's singing a bunch of songs. She sent me a photo of it, and I said, "Holy crap, that's Hugh Jackman! Like Wolverine is there." And she's texting me back. She's like, yeah, he's singing songs. It's really cool. I was like, yeah, he also kills people with his claws. That's pretty cool too. And she didn't get it. She didn't watch the Wolverine movie, so she didn't get it. But it was pretty awesome. She's going again this year. So
hey,
there you go.
Know what?
4 days. I'll have the kids to myself.
I will never knock business. I will never knock business, but I'm not gonna buy the essential oils. But I'll probably die.
Well, she's not a great businesswoman. I think we still spend more money on the oils than we make. She spends more than we make.
Oh, so she's one of those ones who does it because she wants to get the oils for herself. Kind of that's the hustle that's going on here. So you're the one getting hustled, actually, Justin. In that,
you know what? On it. My wife can hustle me anytime she wants. I'll be her. Anytime she wants to hustle me, she's got.
All right. My wife. Speaking of this, let's segue through this. My wife asked me to do this one for you because Justin Herman is a Southern California guy, and there's a lot of youth pastors and a lot of big name youth pastors, a lot of hustlers down in SoCal. And a lot of the guys who are doing the podcast and writing the blogs and are doing that stuff, and they're coming out of SoCal. And so my thing for you is I want you to give me your pick or flick on Southern California.
Oh, I'll pick that. I'll pick that all day long. You know, there's some of the most real people I've ever met in my life in Southern California. There's some of the fakest people I've ever met in my life in Southern California. And yeah, you're right. There's some huge name youth pastors that have come out of Southern California. Huge names. I mean the names, right? I mean, Marco's down the road, Katie, Kurt, Doug. You don't even need to use last names. Everyone knows who I'm talking about. Jim Burns is here. Jonathan, what's his face from the Parent podcast, Jonathan, whatever his name is. There's so many huge people in Southern California. Hotbed, Kurt Johnston, obviously my mentor, my friend, who, by the way, is not a self-promoter at all. He's vocal about it. Me and him are going to talk about it on the podcast, but he's not a self-promoter at all. And I actually probably should be more like him, less like me. But let me tell you this about Southern California. Southern California is beautiful. Let me tell you this, though, just so that we're all on the same page. When I was at Bill Maher, I was talking about the podcast. I was talking to Bill Maher, one of the most famous people, talking about the podcast I do, and he said, "Is there a lot of youth like ministry?" Like he looked like youth ministry, like like he's never heard the word before.
Yeah.
Are there a lot of youth ministry podcasts out there? And I said, yeah. I was like, there's some really big ones. Guy, I don't know if you've ever heard Doug Fields. He's like, Doug who? There's another guy who does, Josh Griffin. I don't know if you ever who, and I dropped a couple more names of people that he's just, like, he doesn't know who these people are. And it's so interesting because the most famous youth pastor, like in our community of youth ministry, we look at some of these people as like the most famous people, and they're, but that's in our bubble. Outside of this profession and any other profession, these are just a bunch of just people who, do talk and do conferences and write books and whatever, but they're just people. No one knows who they are. So I found a lot of humor in that. California drives me nuts lately. They just passed a law recently that you can't promote sugary things with lunch meals. So Wendy's had to take the Frosty off of the kids meal at Wendy's in California.
Man. Wow.
And I threw that up on Facebook, and people are leaving comments, and the whole thing's hilarious. California as a whole is completely nuts. I have so many thoughts on the craziness of California, but Southern California is beautiful. I love living here. I met my beautiful wife here. She's a California girl born in Newport Beach, and we live in Riverside now with 2 California boys. I have hip haircuts. I go to a hip mega church, Mariners Church. Since I don't work at the other church anymore, cough, cough, work at Mariners Church. And
isn't it called like Birkenstocks or something like that? I can't remember what it's called.
Sandals Resorts. It's a really great place. You're going to love it there. It's a really, really great place. But
I'd love to see it,
neither here nor there.
Yeah.
But I go to Mariners Church now, and it's in Southern California. So there's a lot of positives, but like any place, a lot of positives, a lot of negatives. But I used to think like, oh my gosh, that's one of the reasons I moved to California. I moved first to Huntington Beach, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm living in California. This is so great. It's just like living anywhere else. The food's really good, tacos are really good, but there's a lot of BS you got to deal with here too. So take it for what you will.
Okay, so here's my take on it. First of all, never lived in Southern California, only visited Southern California. And I did live in Northern California for a really big chunk of my life. And here's the thing is, California people know this. They're basically 2 different states. It really should be like North Carolina, South Carolina, Northern California, Southern California, very different types of people even, and different types of appeal is really what it is. And so now I live 8 miles from Seattle, and a boat ride. And Seattle's one of the more beautiful cities in the world, and I'm not gonna lie, it is an amazingly beautiful place. Today I got on the ferry. I went over to Seattle for a convention. Actually, my oldest son is really into Minecraft, so we were over there at a convention. And you ride this ferry. It's beautiful, mountains. There's orcas in the water, Justin. They jump, and you get to see them, right? So it's a pretty magical place. I will say this about it. It gets a little annoying, and maybe this is just the cool kids group, how much talent there is coming out of Southern California. And it feels like if you're not there and you're making moves in youth ministry, are you really making moves? And I think there's a lot of guys out there. I had Frank Gill on the podcast a little while, and he's over in the Bible Belt, kind of Great Lakes area. And there is. There's this kind of thing, if you're not in one of those, If you're not in that hotbed of that stuff, sometimes you look at it and you go, all right, we're making moves out here too. We're doing some stuff too. I got a podcast. I got a 1-minute message video that's doing pretty well. But I'm not in Southern California. So is it really happening to the rest of these guys? So my thing on it is sometimes, and I'm gonna say this to a Southern person living in Southern California right now. Sometimes it gets a little annoying. Sometimes the posts get a little annoying, and I'll say it right to your face, Justin. I hope you don't hate me for it, but I'll say it. I'll come out right in there and say it.
If I see one more sunset photo, I think I'm gonna just smash my phone with a hammer. I'm so worn out with the sunset, and like we're about to get into sunset photo season.
Yeah, it's coming,
and I just can't endure that anymore. I think it's a burden on my life. I actually go as far as to say it's immoral. And disgusting. I'm using immoral in the wrong context, obviously, but but yeah, I can't deal with any more sunset photos. It makes me want to throw up every time I see it. Like physically, it makes me physically ill seeing it. Over and over and over again from every different angle you can imagine. Yeah,
and we get it. It's warm. It's warmer there, and we have rain that falls on our head quite a bit. But all right.
Yeah.
Anyway, not to sound bitter, not to sound any of that stuff, but to move on.
You don't at all. You don't sound bitter. Wink, wink. I'm winking for everyone listening on the podcast. Winking.
Yeah. All right, thank you guys for listening to the Fringe Youth Worker Podcast, special edition, co-hosted by the Justin Herman.
Wah, wah, wah.
Wah, 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 wah. And really quick, my son wants to come in here and say hi. He's been bugging. Come on over here, Max. He's getting nervous real quick. We've loved being able to have Justin on the podcast this week. If you haven't, go ahead and listen to his podcast. Go out and buy his book. He's going to need that money. He's in sales now, so we're not sure how good of a salesman he's going to be.
I'm absolutely terrible at self-promotion. Ask the DYM guys.
That's right. But anyway, yeah, it's been awesome to have him on. Of course, he's a friend of the podcast, so we're going to have him back. And currently he's making faces at my son. What's up? Go ahead and say it in the mic.
No.
Okay. Anyway.
Let's make it a Minecraft set. For Legos.
Okay, so we're making Minecraft sets. That's what I'm going to be doing right now. I hope you have a good week, guys. This is the Fringe Youth Worker Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Fringe Youth Worker Podcast. Don't believe anything my dad